The hunter that thrived without touching its prey. There was a hunter so feared that it didn't need to chase. It didn't need to roar. It didn't even need to move. Sometimes its prey died simply trying to avoid it. A careless step, a pause too long at the water's edge, a slip on a muddy bank. That was all it took. This is the story of a predator that ruled without pursuit, a hunter that thrived without touching its prey. In the age of dinosaurs, danger was usually obvious. Massive jaws snapped with sound and fury. Claws tore through flesh. Movement betrayed a predator's presence. Most hunters left a signature on the landscape: tracks, carcasses, blood. Prey learned to recognize these signs, to flee when it mattered most. But some of the deadliest predators in Earth's history operated differently. They did not reveal themselves, and they did not roar or charge. They did not even move. They existed as an ever-present threat, an invisible hand shaping life around them. One of the most terrifying examples of this kind of hunter was Deinosuchus. Deinosuchus was not a dinosaur, though it lived alongside them. It was a crocodilian of staggering size, a creature evolved for stealth and ambush on a scale that modern reptiles cannot match. During the late Cretaceous, in what is now North America, these animals ruled rivers, estuaries, and lowland wetlands with almost imperceptible menace. Imagine a body longer than a modern school bus, heavier than a pickup truck, completely submerged in water, eyes and nostrils barely visible above the surface. To a thirsty dinosaur approaching the bank, there was no warning. The water was still, the forest around it quiet. And yet, the hunter waited, perfectly adapted to exploit hesitation, fear, and the natural instincts of its prey. Deinosuchus didn't need to roam or patrol wide territories. It didn't chase herds across open plains or stalk prey through forests. It ruled edges. Riverbanks, estuaries, swampy channels, and shallow lakes became its hunting grounds. These were the places every creature had to visit. Water was life. And the hunter's genius lay in turning life itself into a trap. Dinosaurs came to drink. They came to migrate. They came to cross water too deep or too treacherous to navigate by foot. Every approach was a gamble. Most of the time, nothing happened, and that was precisely the point. The presence of Deinosuchus reshaped the behavior of entire ecosystems without a single attack. The rivers and wetlands of the late Cretaceous were arteries of life, and Deinosuchus positioned itself at the pulse points. Prey animals learned to hesitate at every river crossing. Herds slowed, groups fragmented. Migration routes twisted unnaturally to avoid certain banks. Juvenile dinosaurs sometimes fell behind, unable to keep pace with altered herd movements. The very act of surviving required calculation, caution, and sometimes fatal hesitation. A young hadrosaur might spend too long evaluating whether the water was safe. By the time it moved forward, dehydration had already begun to weaken it. By forcing these behavioral changes, Deinosuchus reshaped its environment without moving a muscle. Evolution itself became the predator's ally. When Deinosuchus did strike, it did so with terrifying efficiency. Or unlike smaller crocodilians or terrestrial predators that had to chase or corner prey, Deinosuchus used ambush. Fossil evidence tells the story: crushed dinosaur bones with bite marks showing immense pressure, clean breaks, and sudden, overwhelming force. These were not prolonged struggles, they were instantaneous. One grasp, one twist, one submersion into murky depths, and life ended. And yet such strikes were rare. They were a form of punctuation in an otherwise silent strategy. Fear itself did the work of the predator, slowly wearing down prey populations by forcing them into stress, error, and sometimes fatal miscalculations. The genius of Deinosuchus lay in understanding the value of invisibility. Prey could not see the threat until it was too late. Ripples in the water, reflections of a head barely breaking the surface, on subtle changes in current or shadow, these became instruments of intimidation. Evolution rewarded caution, but caution could be deadly if it misjudged the predator's location. Deinosuchus manipulated risk, turning instinct into a weapon. Every animal approaching water had to make split-second decisions with life-or-death consequences. By remaining motionless, the predator amplified its own perceived power. creating a psychological stranglehold on the creatures around it. Even plants and environmental factors played into this predator's strategy. Fallen logs, mud banks, and submerged vegetation provided perfect concealment. The murky waters of estuaries obscured its massive body. Seasonal flooding could raise or lower water levels, creating new ambush points. The ecosystem itself became a tool of the hunter. Dinosaurs learned to sense these dangers, but the learning curve was steep. Each misstep carried consequences. Over time, entire herds and migratory populations shifted, avoiding areas that once offered abundant water or foraging opportunities, altering the landscape simply through fear of a predator they rarely even saw. Deinosuchus was not only a master of ambush, it was a master of patience. Some of the largest specimens may have waited for days in a single location, motionless, breathing slowly, conserving energy, and observing. During this time, prey would come and go, unwittingly shaping themselves into vulnerabilities. The predator needed only a single perfect strike in a lifetime of waiting to secure sustenance. Unlike predators reliant on repeated kills or physical endurance, Deinosuchus capitalized on timing, strategy, and understanding the environment in a way that rivals any human hunter in sophistication. Consider the scale of its influence. Deinosuchus coexisted with some of the largest terrestrial dinosaurs ever. Hadrosaurs, ceratopsians, and even juvenile tyrannosaurs were potential prey. Yet it rarely had to chase a thing. Its existence alone molded the behavior of creatures many times its size. Herds rerouted, migration timing shifted, and water sources became contested zones of tension. The predator's legacy was etched not in the number of kills it made, but in the ripple effect of fear, an invisible empire shaped by instinct, shadow, and patience. From an evolutionary standpoint, Deinosuchus demonstrates a principle rarely appreciated in discussions of predation. Dominance does not require speed, strength, or aggression. It requires control over perception. By creating uncertainty, hesitation, and risk, it forced other species to expend energy, make mistakes, and occasionally perish without ever being touched. Every movement near water became a calculated gamble, a subtle chess game where the stakes were life itself. This type of predation is rare in the fossil record because the hunter's true power lies in what it does not do. Its kills are incidental, but the psychological footprint lasts generations. Even juvenile Deinosuchus likely contributed to this invisible reign. Smaller individuals, still capable of ambush, would learn the tactics of concealment, timing, and selection from their elders. Every generation reinforced the strategy. Prey populations that survived one season would be more cautious, but even caution carried risks. Dehydration, starvation, and weakened defenses. Deinosuchus thrived in this feedback loop. It was evolution embodied, a predator whose strength lay in its ability to influence life without exerting force. The rivers of the late Cretaceous became theaters of life and death, and Deinosuchus was the silent director. Crocodiles today are feared, but none reach the scale, patience, or psychological impact of Deinosuchus. Modern prey animals sometimes survive repeated attacks, but the prehistoric world gave no such luxury. Each hesitation, each misstep, each misjudged approach to water could result in instant death. Deinosuchus created an invisible web, and every creature that moved near it became a player in a game whose rules it alone controlled. Its hunting technique also emphasizes a truth about predation that transcends time. Efficiency often outweighs aggression. Deinosuchus survived not by taking every opportunity to kill, but by maximizing the effect of its presence. Every riverbank it occupied became a zone of subtle attrition. Every herd that adjusted its route, every juvenile too slow to react, every animal that failed to read subtle cues contributed to the predator's survival. It was a masterclass in minimalism, achieving maximum results with the least expenditure of energy, letting fear do what muscle and teeth might do elsewhere. The presence of Deinosuchus transformed the ecosystems it inhabited. Herbivorous dinosaurs adjusted feeding patterns, sometimes over-foraging safe areas and leaving others untouched. Smaller predators faced indirect pressure as their prey altered behavior. Competition intensified even among species not directly preyed upon, because the shadow of the massive crocodilian influenced every decision near water. Over millennia, this would drive evolutionary changes, favoring agility, caution, and awareness. The predator's indirect influence reshaped entire species without the need for repeated violence. By the time Deinosuchus struck directly, the prey was already compromised. Fossil records show evidence of powerful bites applied with precision, often leaving crushed bone or puncture marks on the most vulnerable parts of the body. These were not chaotic attacks. They were calculated strikes that confirmed the efficiency of patience. A single encounter could remove an individual from a population, but its main legacy was the behavioral modifications imparted to countless others. Its dominance was not measured by kills alone, but by the pervasiveness of the fear it instilled. Deinosuchus reminds us that some of the most effective predators are not those constantly on the move or those that rely on brute force. True mastery comes from understanding the landscape, understanding the prey, and using psychology and patience as tools. It thrived in environments that were dynamic, challenging, and filled with potential hazards for other species. By combining size, stealth, and patience, it achieved a level of ecological influence unmatched in its time. Deinosuchus didn't need to chase. It didn't need to roar. It didn't even need to kill often. It ruled by controlling behavior, manipulating fear, and creating a world where every step toward water was a calculated risk. Its prey, by simply living and making instinctual choices, fell into the predator's web again and again. In this way, the deadliest predator of the late Cretaceous didn't leave a trail of constant carnage. It left a permanent, invisible mark on the ecosystem, a legacy of intimidation, control, and unrivaled patience. Deinosuchus survived the late Cretaceous not merely because of its size or strength, but because it understood something fundamental. The most effective hunting strategy sometimes requires inaction. By turning rivers, estuaries, and crossing points into instruments of fear, it forced the creatures around it to weaken themselves, to make mistakes, and sometimes to perish. Inaction became action, patience became power, and fear became the ultimate tool. So the predator that thrived without touching its prey became one of the most successful hunters the world has ever known. Even the smallest details of Deinosuchus's habitat played into its mastery. Submerged logs, reeds, and the shifting sediment of riverbanks created perfect concealment, allowing it to blend seamlessly with the environment. Water temperature, current speed, and seasonal flooding patterns dictated where prey would appear and when, and the predator seemed almost attuned to these rhythms. Juvenile dinosaurs, inexperienced and curious, often became the first to test the boundaries of safety, unknowingly revealing optimal ambush points. Even larger adults, forced to follow predictable migration paths or drink from the same pools year after year, fell into the same invisible traps. Over time, the entire populations learned to hesitate, to second-guess instinct, and to mistrust the natural rhythms of their own environment. Deinosuchus did not merely hunt. It orchestrated a subtle symphony of fear, using terrain, water, and the predictable patterns of life itself as extensions of its predatory will. In essence, the crocodilian did not need to touch its prey at all. The ecosystem bent to its presence, every decision, every hesitation, every cautious step amplifying the predator's power without a single strike. Deinosuchus didn't rule its world by chasing prey. It ruled by waiting, by controlling where life could safely exist, by teaching every animal one brutal lesson. Sometimes, the deadliest predator is the one you never see. And as time passed, this predator's silent reign shaped behavior, evolution, and survival strategies across an entire continent. In the ecosystems it dominated, the mere thought of water meant danger, and that thought was enough to bend life to its will, end life to its will, end life